Hello, welcome back to the channel. It's been a while, my apologies about that, but I've been busy in life. I've had a baby and had lots of other stuff going on, but I'm here today to talk about Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse. Now, if you couldn't tell by this big canvas behind me, I'm a massive Spider-Man fan. I don't generally have a favourite film, but if I had to choose one, I'd tend to say it's Spider-Man 2. Big fan of the Raimi trilogy, grew up watching the 90s animated show, played all the video games, seen all the films, I'm a lifelong Spider-Man fan. Into the Spider-Verse was largely considered one of the best comic book films of all time. It was my favourite film of 2018, and probably my favourite Spider-Man film since Spider-Man 2 when it came out. But yeah, Across the Spider-Verse I think honestly is better. Not only is it a good film, but particularly it's a good Spider-Man film. Like I said, I'm a massive Spider-Man fan. There's so many Easter eggs in there to characters and Spider-Man lore that are quite niche and that I never thought, even the villains, the Spot, I remember him from the 90s animated show. Never in a million years did I think he would be the main villain in a Spider-Man film, but he is, and they actually do him really well. And Spot as a character, obviously he's covered in like interdimensional holes, that does lend itself perfectly to a Spider-Verse, but it would also be very easy for that to come across goofy. And they do a really good job of making it work, and just the film as a whole is incredible. Obviously, kind of have to start by talking about the animation. It has the same flavour as the animation from Into the Spider-Verse, but at the same time, it massively expands on it. Into the Spider-Verse had that kind of comic book look to it, where, it looked like panels of comic books, and it would have the little things in the corner that would say like, later that evening, or it'd come up and say thwip on the screen or whatever. It has all that, but it also has lots of different animation styles depending on the world we're in or depending on the character that we're dealing with. Like Spider-Punk is drawn really kind of sketchily, and then you've got characters that are drawn in like a Renaissance kind of fashion. Every character pretty much has their own animation style that suits them and their world, and it's just, it really is just next level. I've never seen animation like this. How they've managed to make this 2.5 hour film, and then obviously Beyond the Spider-Verse comes out next year, how they've managed to do both of these in 6 years, I've got no idea, because the amount of talent and art and creativity that's gone into this, I just can't even imagine how long that must take. Obviously a lot of it is done on the computer and it's made to look like it's hand-drawn, but even then, and on a budget of 100 million as well, it looks a lot more expensive than that. So that's the visuals out of the way. Obviously you knew the visuals are going to be staggering, but how's everything else? Well, first and foremost, this is a story about Miles Morales, and it really is a character piece. It's Miles, he's been Spider-Man for a year at this point, and he's dealing with that. He's kind of settling into his role, and he's becoming more confident there, but then his grades are suffering at school, his relationships with his parents are kind of breaking down. He's not turning up to big family events that he should be at, and that he can't tell them why he wasn't able to be there. And with that comes a really, really thematically rich storyline where Miles's parents are saying, you're our son, you have to do what we say, we know best, you're still a child. And he's saying, no, I'm 15, I'm basically an adult, it's my life, I can do what I want, it's up to me. And you can really see both points of view. As I say, I'm a new parent. I've not seen many films that have dealt with sort of parenting issues, but it really struck a chord with me. And the idea that you have to, at some point, let your child go and be their own person. Obviously, I'm not going to have to deal with that for a little while. But it's a two-sided coin, and they show both sides of that argument really well. And I thought that was a kind of character dynamic and a relationship dynamic that I've not seen explored very much in films. I'm struggling to think of many occasions where I have seen it. So really great coming-of-age story there. There is a lot going on. Gwen steps up to the plate in this one. She's in it a lot more, and again, not just in it for the fight scenes, but actually as a character, and you see what she's dealing with, or maybe not dealing with so well, and what she's got going on. You've got all these other spider people that come into it, which I won't ruin in case you don't know, but there are lots of characters at play. Obviously you've got the Spot as the villain, you've got Miles' parents in it, and just loads and loads of characters. Which my biggest concern going into this was, how are they going to balance all of these characters without it feeling messy? If I'm being totally honest, there are times, particularly at the start, where it feels a little bit messy, or maybe messy is not the right word, but it's just a little bit, it takes a while to kind of catch you up on where everyone's at. And I don't even think Miles is in the film for about the first 20 minutes, because it's so focused on Gwen and then the characters that she's kind of dealing with. But by the end of the film, it is very well balanced. You don't feel like you haven't got enough Miles. It feels, you know, like everyone's got about the right amount of screen time, and they really do handle it all very well. A lot of these characters, I want to say they're cameos. They're a bit more than cameos, but the writers and directors know to push them to the sideline so they can really focus on Gwen and Miles. There are some characters from the first film, particularly Peter B. Parker, who is not in it anywhere near as much as I kind of hoped he would be. But the new characters come in and they do the same job. I mean, different roles, and they maybe aren't quite the mentor that Peter B. Parker was, but similar amounts of screen time. They're there to kind of get in on the action and provide laughs and stuff, and they do that job really well. And of course, it's cool to see different versions of the Spider-Man character. Now, this being I think it's 2 hours and 20 minutes, which is the longest Hollywood released animated film of all time. I will say I felt the length a little bit going into the third act. It got to a point where I thought it was wrapping up, and then there was about another 20 minutes. And for that 20 minutes, I did feel a little bit like this has been going on for a while. Not because it wasn't boring or slow or anything like that, but just because there's so much going on and it's so visually stimulating. Just, it did feel like, okay, like I'm almost exhausted now from watching this, because it's just there's just so much coming at you. I could have done with it being either a little bit shorter, or maybe having some of, at the start, they kind of, they do the voiceover thing again, like they do in Into the Spider-Verse, where they explain how he became Spider-Man and how he's got to where he is. And I just think if they trimmed that out, they could probably save about 10 minutes of exposition, which I really don't even think was necessary. I don't think anybody's watching this film that hasn't already watched Into the Spider-Verse. But yeah, that's the world we live in. But minor nitpicks, really. I mean, everything about it really is just absolutely world class. The tone of the film as well, while it is obviously really fun and it's visually vibrant and bright and colourful, it's also, like, tonally, it's, I'd say, darker than the first one. There's a lot of things that Miles has to deal with and Gwen has to deal with that, I mean, I'm not going to get into it and spoil it, but quite dark for this kind of film. And also, on top of the things they have to deal with, just in general, the tone is quite dire and quite serious. Like, everything going on with Spot, you really feel like he is a serious threat. So yeah, it's intense, it's emotional. Of course, it is action-packed. It's funny, but I don't think as funny as the first one. Not in the way where there's jokes that aren't landing, but just there's fewer jokes, I feel like. Also, one of my little nitpicks with the first one is that I didn't love the character of Spider-Ham. I thought he was a little bit cringy and a little bit childish. Thankfully, he's not in this. Well, that's a lie. He is in it briefly, but not a lot. There are a lot of cameos to look out for and a lot of Easter eggs, so be on the lookout for those. You will not catch all. You could watch this film probably 50 times and you would still be finding new things every time you watched it, because the frames are just absolutely packed with detail, and you know, there's a lot of quick cuts and things happening in the background. You just have to sit there and pause it a million times to catch everything, and even then you'd probably miss some stuff. But that's the beauty of it. I feel like this is going to be a film that's really fun to rewatch, because you will always have a slightly different experience with it. You'll notice new things, you'll pick up new details, and yeah, just in general, I think it explores the concept of a multiverse probably better than anything that I've seen yet. I think Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness should have been like this, but instead it was a little bit more goofy. It didn't take itself quite as seriously, which is a good thing in some ways. And you know, I love the Sam Raimi-isms and stuff in that film, but yeah, it just feels like the stakes are really, really high, which is not easy to do when we live in a world where we're seeing multiverse stories all the time. And they actually do address that as well. There's a line, I think it's even in the trailer, where Peter B. Parker says, "Whenever you say the fate of the multiverse, my brain dies," which is obviously a bit of commentary and saying people are kind of sick of that and it sounds cliche. And they address that really well. Of the new characters, for me, the standouts were Spider-Punk. I like the Spot, although he's only in it. He's in it kind of the first half, and then he's not in it as much towards the second half. The Mumbai version of Spider-Man was really funny. And Spider-Man 2099 is really great as well. It's an older, more jaded version who does kind of darker things because he thinks that he has to. And yeah, it was good to see the dynamic of that versus this, you know, up-and-coming Miles Morales, and how they clash, and how maybe their ideologies are the same, but they go about things in a different way, and how that resolves or maybe doesn't resolve itself. Amongst all of this, though, I will say, so incredible film, amazing visuals, great story, great tone, family dynamics, all of that, you know, all pretty much pitch perfect. One thing I will say, and this is not an objective flaw, if there is such a thing as an objective flaw, but it is a personal grievance that I have, like just a tiny little nitpick. But it's so big and so, you know, the stakes are so high, and the scale of it, you know, going across multiverses and having all these different characters in it. if you're the kind of person that likes your Spider-Man stories to be small and contained, if you want this sort of friendly neighborhood Spider-Man, you know, this is the furthest thing from that you can get. And I personally do like when Spider-Man's the only superhero, when he's contained to New York, when he's fighting kind of street level villains and stuff like that. That's generally speaking the Spider-Man that I grew up on and that I love. Obviously, Spider-Man's had many stories in the comics where he, you know, does much bigger things than that. And so I'm not saying it isn't inherently Spider-Man, but I'm saying for the Spider-Man that I'm used to, you know, the last few films we've had from Spider-Man, it's been saving the multiverse. You had that in No Way Home, you had that in Into the Spider-Verse, and now we've had it in Across the Spider-Verse. So I am hoping that with this new Tom Holland trilogy, it looks like they are going to do this, but I really hope they kind of hone it in, set it in New York, bring the stakes down, make it a bit more fun, a bit more personal. But again, that's just a personal thing with me, so I just thought that was worth mentioning. So yeah, overall, Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse is the best animated film, as in it's animated the best, that I've ever seen. The story's great, it's dark, it's funny, it's pretty focused considering how much it has to go on. It is obviously a part 1 of 2, so don't go into this expecting a full story. You know, think of it how it might have been when you watch Dune, where you get to the end of it and you think, okay, I've had a good couple of hours, the story's advanced, but it's not yet resolved. So that's a little thing to bear in mind. You can't walk out this feeling 100% satisfied because it does end on a cliffhanger. But all in all, this is going to be probably one of the best films of the year. I'm pretty sure it's going to win Best Animated Film of the Year. I think it has to, really, unless something comes out and is somehow even better, but that seems very unlikely. If you're a Spider-Man fan, you'll like this. If you're a fan of the art and animation in particular, I think this is going to be unlike anything you've ever seen. The soundtrack's great as well. And, you know, like I said, there's loads of little cameos, so it's a fun one to watch. And like I say, I'm going to go see it again this weekend. I'm going to be on the lookout for things I missed the first time. I'm sure there's going to be lots of them, but that's the brilliance of it. So they've done it again. They're 2 for 2 now. If Beyond the Spider-Verse can be this good, we're going to be talking about this as the best Spider-Man trilogy that's ever been made, and probably the best Spider-Man trilogy that ever will be made. And it's also just going to be one of the best trilogies ever made. I mean, you can forget the fact it's Spider-Man. It is that good. So definitely recommend it. The only way I wouldn't recommend this is, yeah, I don't know, if you've got epilepsy, maybe this isn't for you. If you hate Spider-Man, even if you hate Spider-Man though, I feel like this could work for you because there's so many different versions of Spider-Man in here that differ from what we know Spider-Man to be. So go see it on the biggest, loudest screen that you can. I think you'll have a good time with it. I'll be reviewing Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning Part 1 next, so make sure you keep an eye out for that. Subscribe and turn notifications on, and drop a like on the video if you've enjoyed it, because it helps out the algorithm. Cheers for joining me, and see you next time.